here. Cheryl Enders is Summit Funding's staff appraiser. I'll let her tell you what that really means, but to me, it means that she is she is a licensed appraiser. I know you've done appraisals in the past, Cheryl. Are you actually still licensed?
Yeah, I'm actually certified, which is a level above licensed. There's several licensing levels, but yes, I've been a certified appraiser since 2002, 20 years now.
Love it. Well, I've been told that I'm certifiable. I think that's a little different than certified, but needless to say, so Cheryl's been doing appraisals for a long time. She is an employee of Summit Funding, and she's really our go-between with communicating to our appraisers what can be done, what can't be done, confirming questions that we have about appraisals. And so she is really an expert, both having been in the field, but also working for a lender, us. And most lenders don't have an appraiser on staff. So this is something very, very unique, and one of our competitive advantages is we have Cheryl, who can help us to navigate the appraisal maze. So let's go ahead and dive in to our presentation. So let's see if I can get my PowerPoint to change. PowerPoint, oh PowerPoint, why are you not changing? There you go. All right, I got to hit enter, I guess. All right, so how to read an appraisal. So we're actually going to go through an actual appraisal, and I'll give you some thoughts on what to read. I'll tell you, if you're anything like me in the beginning, all I ever did was go to the bottom of the second page and see what is the opinion of value and is it as is. And that's the most important stuff, but there's some other things that I think you should pay attention to, and I'm gonna cover that with you. And then we're gonna do Q&A. So I've got some questions and answers and thoughts that I've already prepared on PowerPoint, and then we'll have the ability for you to ask questions. Again, post it via chat right now. And if you have questions about anything at the end, we're also gonna cover Q&A at the end of the presentation. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first thing I'll tell you is there are really, and Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there are 4 different types of reports that may be created depending upon the type of property that is being appraised. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so they're all going to look a little bit different, but they're all going to have the same components. I'm, for the sake of time, only going to show you an FHA triplex that has rental income to give you an example of some of the things to look at. The basic formatting is identical. So you're going to look for the same things on an appraisal report, regardless of what type of report you're looking at. Just recognize it's going to have a little bit different formatting, a little bit different order, but all the same components exist. So the first thing I'll tell you is, and I'll show you this on the page, but the first step is double check the property address and pictures. Cheryl, I don't know how often you've run into it, but I've had situations where I just plain got the wrong appraisal. Have you seen that happen?
I have. I've also seen it where it's the right property, but somehow the wrong pictures got uploaded. That's just a glitch, and it doesn't mean the appraiser went to the wrong property. But yeah, that does happen occasionally where they do go to the wrong property.
Well, that's true. What I'll say, guys, is, and this is going to be the biggest shocker of this entire meeting, appraisers, very much like underwriters, they're human. They make mistakes. They have a typo. I've had times where the appraisal came in low, but as I'm looking at their comparable values, I'm looking at it saying, wait a second, how did you come in low when all the comps match the price? They just typoed the value, and they put, 530 instead of 630, and it was a typo. So just recognize you got to double check some of the basics on an appraisal. Typically, Cheryl, can you explain the quality control process on the front end before an appraisal is even delivered to the loan officer and to the borrower?
Yeah, and we don't have a real robust quality control. The appraisal team only looks at certain things. They look at, I believe it's the borrower name, the purchase price that's in value track versus the appraised value. And I think that that's about it, John. I don't think that they do really any more than that. That's
got it.
Yeah, sorry, I should know that, but they don't do very much.
So one of the things that they do, though, is they don't, and this is our process, we don't send the appraisal out immediately if it missed value, meaning they send it to me, but they don't send it to the borrower. And that gives me the opportunity to kind of look at it, talk to you about it. If the value didn't come in at the contract price, then they're going to hold off and not deliver that immediately. And that way we've got a little bit of an opportunity to get ahead of the curve, figure out if there's any errors in it, and kind of do some QC on our own before that is going to be delivered to the client. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think it's 48 hours before they deliver that to the client.
Perfect. Yeah, and then we have to deliver it. So if we don't change anything in the next 48 hours, then we'll do that. Always check the contract price on page 1 of the report. You want to make sure all addendums were included. I will tell you the number one reason, I saw somebody post a question, so we'll get to this in just a second. The number one reason why I see a value come in low that is incorrect is because the appraiser didn't have the addendums. And so the appraiser's looking at it saying, well, this house is selling for, 600, and I see houses around the area that are closing between 590 and 620. So yeah, 600 is logical. But they didn't have an addendum, a multiple counter offer, a change in price that increased it to 615, because the appraiser would have happily appraised it at 615 because that's within the brackets. In other words, they kind of have a low end and a high end of what they see comparable values, and that's within the brackets. So Cheryl, when that happens, what options do we have where, we didn't give you the addendums and the appraisal came in at the contract price, they just had the wrong contract price?
Yeah, that is a little bit unfortunate, but many times, most times, if it's already within the range of values, like you said, John, if it's between 590, the range is between 590 and 620, appraiser comes in at 600, we're like, uh-oh, it was really 607. There's many times where the appraiser will happily say, this was already within my adjusted range of values. It's already very well supported. I'm comfortable increasing my value to the purchase price after I read this addendum.
Perfect. So in other words, don't freak out. If it was wrong,
Right.
just reach out to the lender. Clearly, I'm going to be your lender. Wink, wink. And I'll work with Cheryl. We'll work on it. Obviously, there's a chance that we won't be able to increase the value. Most of the time when I've run into this, we are able to increase the value. They talk about financing concessions in that top section as well. But Cheryl, there's been kind of a shift in that, because it used to be that any time you renegotiated seller credits, we had to get the appraisal updated. Catch me up and catch everybody up on what the status is of that requirement.
Yeah, if there is any negotiations that transpire after the effective date of the appraisal, the Fannie Mae does not want or require the appraiser to update the appraisal. So they say they renegotiate the contract price, and many times it's based on the appraised value. We don't send the appraiser an addendum and say, hey, go ahead and update this. This all transpired after the effective date. We don't need to do that. The underwriting department handles that. The appraisal stays the way it was.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to sidestep real quick. Eric asked a question, Cheryl. I don't know if you've seen it in the chat, but he asked about if the Appraisal Institute had issued guidelines for solar PV systems. I'll stop there and say, are you familiar with that? And do you know if there's any guidelines around that?
No, I don't know if there's any guidelines. I will write this question down and I will circle back around with you, John, and
okay.
And you can answer Eric.
Perfect.
Solar PV, Appraisal Institute, solar PV. Okay.
So I think I'm going to read the question behind Eric's question. He had a report last week that was, they gave a $15,000 adjustment for the owned solar system. And Eric, feel free to jump in here via chat, or if you want to unmute, do that too. But one of the questions I think he's asking is kind of, hey, that $15,000 adjustment, where does that number come from? And are there standards that maybe if there's a guideline provided by the Appraisal Institute, do they tell appraisers, hey, solar is worth blank or a pool is worth blank? How does that work?
No, the appraiser needs to analyze the market and determine what any element of comparison, whether it be a pool, a guest house, an owned solar system, they have to determine what the market reaction is to that. And it's not based on cost. It's based on what a typical buyer will pay for that element, for that feature.
Perfect. Eric, again, feel free to jump in if I'm going the wrong direction here, but that 15,000 you got was the appraiser's opinion. And there's never going to be guidelines that say this is the amount that you're going to get for solar. Some upgrades aren't considered to increase value. They only increase marketability. There's things you can do to I don't know, you repaint the home. Okay, well, hey, that you spent $5,000 to repaint the outside of the home, but is somebody going to pay $5,000 more for your house compared to the identical house next door that hasn't been repainted. And that's what the appraiser's looking at and saying, you know what, the truth is, no, they'd rather take the unpainted house and save the $5,000. If that's the appraiser's opinion, then that doesn't increase value. It makes it more marketable. It makes it so that if they're both of those homes are at the exact same price, clearly the buyers are going to choose the painted one because they get that upgrade for free. Cheryl, would you have anything to add to that description, or do you want to throw it out the window and tell me I'm totally wrong?
No, I think you're right on. You hit it right on the head. It doesn't necessarily add value, and like we all know, you can spend $90,000 to put a pool in. A typical buyer is going to maybe, depending on the market, pay $10,000. So it's the same sort of idea. You might not get anything for that upgrade, or you might get a portion of your money back.
Got it. So Eric, feel free to comment again if I'm missing something on here, but I'll move on now. The next thing you want to do is check the value and the condition on the bottom of page 2. And I'm going to show you the entire reconciliation section. You really need to pay attention to it. And we care about the sales comparison approach. I'll show you what that means. And you want to look to see if it's as is or subject to, but make sure you read the comments, okay? And then finally, you want to look for possible repair issues in a few key locations. There's a supplemental addendum I'll show to you, and then you need to look at every picture and look at the comments that come with the pictures. Cheryl, I know we've run into sometimes where the appraiser checks as is and then takes a picture of a water heater that has no straps on it and comments unstrapped water heater. Have you seen that before?
Yes.
Okay, how is that handled? I mean, the appraiser said as is, so technically it's as is, but he also showed us in a picture, there's an unstrapped water heater.
Well, Summit Funding specifically, I can't speak for other lenders, they do allow an as-is appraisal for 3 issues: unstrapped water heaters, missing CO detectors, missing smoke detectors. We need those in this area. We need all 3 of those. So we allow a lender cert, meaning that the loan officer has to go out, take the photos, write up a certification stating that they saw that these issues were repaired and sign their name to it. And we will accept that, but only if the report is as is. If the report is subject to missing water heater straps, CO detectors, smoke detectors, we have to send the appraiser back out.
Got it. I'm sure I'm going off the record here, so feel free to decline to comment, but I know of a couple situations where we reached out, I didn't personally, but somebody from corporate reached out to the appraiser and said, hey, are you willing to change this to as is, even though the water heater isn't strapped? Have you come across that? And is that a taboo subject to talk about?
No, not at all. Because if we know that we want to save our borrower $150 and the loan officer says, no, I want to do a lender cert, then I will call the appraiser and say, are you comfortable with changing your report to as is and stating, these things are missing, but I'm completing the report as is. That's their prerogative to do that. And almost always they say, yeah, that's fine. Sometimes FHA appraisals, they say, no, I still consider that a health and safety issue, so I'm going to keep the report as is. But it's up to them, and many times they're super cooperative. We tell them we have to get that. We're going to get a lender cert. You're not on the hook for that. You're not liable for that. And they're pretty cooperative with us.
That's beautiful. Guys, if it's not clear enough, one of my goals here is to educate you. The other goal is to convince you to use me instead of anybody else. So it is not subtle, but that's having Cheryl makes this world of difference, because could you imagine using an appraisal management company that's a neutral third party? They're not going to do that. They're not going to get involved. They want to stay neutral. But even with Cheryl's position, even if I can't call, even if my underwriter called and said, hey, can you make this as is? I've had many times where before we had Cheryl, the appraiser would say, no, you don't understand appraisals. You're just an underwriter. You don't understand my rules. Cheryl, can you address that? Do you run into that sometimes with people that don't know who you are and say, well, you work for the lender, you don't understand appraisals?
Well, see, I always introduce myself as the staff appraiser. So right away, I kind of feel like I kind of have an in with them. They understand that I am an appraiser, and I do understand USPAP and all the other guidelines around what they do. So I don't typically get a lot of pushback from appraisers when I call and introduce myself as an appraiser.
Perfect. But that really makes a big difference because, by the way, Cheryl, can you see the appraisal on my screen?
Mhm.
Beautiful. Okay. So guys, that's a really big difference because most lenders, they're going to call and try and do this. And the appraiser is going to shoot them down and say, yeah, you don't understand the USPAP. I don't even know what USPAP is. US Professional Appraiser Protocol.
It's something like that.
Yeah.
Universal standards of professional appraisal practice, but yeah, close.
Got it. Okay. Chris has a great question. Chris says, do FHA and VA appraisals come in lower than conventional? Chris, do you want to answer, excuse me, Cheryl, do you want to address that or do you want me to?
If you have some input, yes, I'm going to say no. That is not a true statement. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
Chris, a comp is a comp is a comp. If the difference between FHA and conventional, FHA VA versus conventional has to do a little bit with property condition. There's some things that conventional can overlook that on FHA we cannot. But when it comes to value, the values are based on comparable sales and based on the appraiser's opinion of the current market value. And they would use the same rationale for the same home on the same day, whether it was an FHA, VA, or conventional loan. Cheryl, would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that. And in fact, sometimes we've seen where if it was FHA, it would come in a little bit higher because there are required repairs that have to be done. So the appraiser takes those repairs into consideration in the value because it's subject to those repairs. Whereas for conventional, it's like, I don't need to make it subject to because it's conventional, but I am going to take that, really whatever the issue is into consideration in the condition. So for FHA, the condition might need to be upgraded a little bit. So it might come in a little bit higher if it was FHA or VA. Actually,
Love it.
yeah, might be the
Love it.
opposite.
Chris, I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to comment. So guys, I'm going to go through an appraisal really quick with you. The layout, some appraisers use cover pages, some don't. It's 54 pages long, but that's the page, that's the notation of the total report pages. The actual appraisal report itself is also labeled. And again, this is an FHA rental property, 3-unit, well, obviously FHA has to be owner occupied. So in this case, the appraiser shows on the front page opinion to value is 500,000. That's not the real location. It should match, but the truth is that number is not the number that matters. Often the appraiser talks about scope of work. Again, I did a great job. I felt like I worked for the FBI because I was having fun redacting, and that was awesome. So anyway, the reality is that the value that matters as you look through here, we've got, again, scope of work, et cetera. But I'm jumping to the actual report. He's talking about some comments. This is all just generic stuff. This is the part of the report that matters. So this is the residential income property report, but they all look very similar. You got borrower contact information up here, contract details. This is the first part that you got to pay attention to. In my situation, in this particular home, contract price is $350,000, but you saw on the first page it said value is 500. Well, this happens to be a sale from family. So it was they were buying from their parents, and so there was they were getting it for a great price. They even put that here. Hey, it's a non-arm's length transaction, and that was the particulars of this transaction. But what you're looking for here is you're looking for the details about the contract. Did they have it right? Because if they had the contract details wrong, that can drive why they had the wrong value. And I want to drive this point home. An appraiser is not giving their opinion of market value. Cheryl, feel free to correct me after I finish. The appraiser is not truly saying this is what I would pay for the home. The appraiser on a purchase is saying, I've got a buyer and a seller that have agreed to a price. Do I believe the market supports that number? Which is why 99% of the time you get exactly what the property appraised for is exactly what the contract price was. That isn't magic, that isn't luck. It's the appraiser already knew what the agreed upon price is, and the appraiser is simply saying, does that price is it justified based on current market conditions, or is this buyer the only one silly enough to spend this much money for this home? Cheryl, anything you want to add, subtract, or delete from that?
No, that pretty much hits it right on the head.
Perfect. Okay, so that's the first thing you're looking at. The next thing that you are looking at, again, these are all basic details. The only time you're going to really pay attention to any of this stuff is if you didn't get your contract price. Now you start picking it apart and saying, did the appraiser get all the details correctly? Did they get the square footage correctly? Did they get the number of bedrooms and bathroom count correctly? All of that stuff, that only matters to me if we don't get the contract price. Now, in this case, this is an income producing property, and they do rental comparisons first. But it on a rental or on a sale, obviously on a rental property, they are asked to give us a number. How much do we think this property could rent for? And they're looking at other comparable rentals to determine what other rentals are renting for. And they're using the same grid process. In other words, hey, what's the location? How old is this? What's the living area? What is parking? All of these things matter to tenants. And so they're using those statistics to adjust and say, this is what I think this property could rent for. This particular appraisal, I don't know that I prepared Cheryl for it, but this particular appraisal, Cheryl spent almost the entire month of November harassing the appraiser on my behalf because he significantly undervalued the rental income. And he essentially said the rents were significantly lower than what we felt like market rents would be. And I'll show you here. This is the final version where he came back and said it's $3,000 a month. He first came back because the property was currently rented at $1,100. He used the $1,100 number as the market rents. And it took an act of Congress to convince him that that is really not true and that there were comps that supported a higher number. So I'm not sure if you remember this one, Cheryl, but there was a lot of back and forth and giving him different comps on rentals to prove that, because it created a major problem. And I'll discuss it in a couple of minutes, what that really meant to the transaction. But the bottom line is, go ahead.
We can rebut the fair market rent opinion, just like we can rebut the actual opinion of value for the sales comparables.
Yes, and here's our response, because on November 9th, Cheryl reached out and they said, yep, but they were not going to change the value. Rental data is limited, and they added one comp, but they didn't. No opinion of market rents was changed. And then November 29th, we added another comp, and then finally they changed the market value. So we went back and forth multiple times on this one to get the rents income changed on this one. But let's go down to comparable sales. So now what they're looking at is they're looking at all of the details to compare this property to other properties. This is where you need to pay attention if you did not get the value you were looking for, and saying, well, wait a second, are there better comps that should have been used? Again, if you got the value, you're fine, skip it. But if you didn't, then you need to take a look here and say, okay, what's the address? Obviously, I redacted the addresses, but what's the address of that? How far away did they use them? And there's really, Cheryl, can you talk about kind of some of the overall things that an appraiser looks at to say, hey, what constitutes a good comp versus a bad comp?
Well, yeah. So, the three things are most similar, most recent, most proximate. You're never going to get all three of those in every comp. So sometimes
let's repeat those real quick.
Hold on. Most recent.
Most recent. So how long ago it sold? So a comp that sold yesterday is a better comp than one that sold 6 months ago, is what you're saying. So recency, yeah. Perfect. What's the second thing?
Most similar.
So similarity. So a house that is the exact same model match as my home is a better comp than a house that is 1,000 square feet bigger than my home, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And then what's the third thing?
Most proximate, because we all know location, location, location.
So the house next door is a better comp than the house 2 miles away.
Yes, even if by the same builder.
Perfect. So
yes,
the perfect comp is a model match next door that closed yesterday.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would define, well, that's clearly the value of your home. Now it isn't clearly the value, because the property that closed yesterday went into contract 30 days ago, and market prices, especially right now, are rising in 30 days. So that doesn't necessarily make it a perfect comp, because we can have time adjustments. So share a little bit more. Keep going, Cheryl. I cut you off a couple times.
Oh, no, that's fine. So you're rarely going to find three of those that match all those criteria. So the appraiser needs to bracket the elements of comparison. So say on this particular one, there's 3 units. He or she should provide a 3-unit comp. I don't see any 3-unit
Nope.
comps on this grid. That would be something that I would find to be an issue. There might be comps on the next page, but let's pretend that there's not. He should have provided a comp that had 3 units. That would be something similar. And then similar bedroom and bathroom counts, similar GLA. We can't cover all elements with one comp, but like comp number 1, 0.05 miles away. Bingo, that covers our very proximate. So that one's proximate. Which one of these is the most recent? And I don't know what our effective date is on this, John, but I'm imagining that comp number 1 is going to be the most recent because
Right here, 1015 COE, 927 and 811.
Yeah. And then, so most recent, most proximate, most similar. I don't see any that are super similar, but maybe there just weren't any. So he or she used the most similar that they could. Trying to find something with 3 units, trying to find something that's around 1,815 square feet, trying to find something that maybe has similar parking if that's important. Usually on a rental, bedroom, bathroom count is going to be the most important thing.
Got it. And for the record, gang, this property was listed at, or sold at 350. He appraised it at 500. Now his comps were anywhere from 467 to 500, and he put it on the high end of that. Now my guess is he went to the high end of that because he knows that he was only comparing 2-unit properties, and a 3-unit property definitely has more value than the 2s. So he picked the high end of the range of the 2-unit properties, knowing, I think, that this is only in contract for 350, so I don't have to try super hard to reach a higher value for comparable sales. Is that a reasonable deduction here, Cheryl?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, so bottom line is that appraisers, their job is to justify the value that you've got on the contract. And we specifically handpick the panel of appraisers that we allow to do our transactions. And part of it is we want appraisers that understand that concept. They're not supposed to stand in the way of, well, I wouldn't pay this much for that property. I've had some appraisers, I've heard some horror stories in the industry about appraisers saying, I would never spend $50,000 over what the list price is. And so I refuse to appraise a property for more than the list price. That's not going to happen here, right, Cheryl?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, they should. That's biased.
That's biased.
They should be unbiased.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
I'm going to move through this a little bit faster. What you're looking at right here is the reconciliation piece. So you've got income approach, cost approach, and sales comparison approach. They're used for different reasons in different types of lending. For us, what we care most about is the sales comparison approach, but really what we care about is this number right here. The number at the bottom of this page is the key number that says this is what the appraiser thinks the house is worth. If there's a discrepancy between here and page 1, first of all, Cheryl's going to catch that, or they're going to catch it, and they're going to ask the appraiser to fix it. But technically, this is the real number. Is that correct, Cheryl?
It is. And that number is based on reconciling the sales comparison approach, the income approach, and the cost approach.
Got it. Well, that was news to me.
And they should have reconciliation commentary in there that gives the reader a real clear picture of how they got to the 500,000 within the range of comparable sales, which this one looks like it goes from 467 to 5, and within the range of the 3 approaches to value.
Got it. Any comments on that right here, guys? I honestly never read this. I don't spend a lot of time. Again, this is a large report, 49 pages. So I quickly go on the top of the page that goes, what's on contract? I go down here, is it as is? Every once in a while, I see them check as is, but they also add comments right here. And that's where they might say it's as is, but you need to replace you need to add water heater strapping, and you need to, get the CO2 detector installed. So don't just think as is enough. They can make it as is, but still add some comments for repair. Okay. And then the rest of it, you've got more comparable sales. So there's more, it's all the same gridding. But the key is don't stop there. Go down a little bit further, and there is an addendum. So basically the appraiser finishes, this is page 7. I always read the appraisal comments addendum. Now, most of this neighborhood description, yeah, I'm not too worried about this stuff, but often at the bottom of this, and I'm kind of just scanning through the chapter headers, the paragraph headers, and I'm going to go to condition of property. because this is where I find sometimes that there are some repairs that an underwriter will uncover, even though it wasn't on the bottom of that page 2, where it might say as is with no comments, but in condition of property, you're going to find, functional obsolescence. You're going to find, concern with roof. I've seen some stupid things where, and here we've got, hey, smoke alarms. He's talking about all this stuff. It's not common, but I will always read through condition because I don't want to be surprised. I don't want to tell you as a realtor, release your contingency, we've got no repairs, and then the underwriter mysteriously finds something. This is where the mysteries live. Cheryl, anything to add to that part?
No, you're pretty accurate on that.
Perfect. Linda had a question. What if you had a country property with grapes? What kind of grapes, Linda? Just kidding. And a small, older home. The appraiser used one comp that had a newer, larger home and the same acreage, but it was bare land. So that's a tough one. Cheryl, do you want to try and answer that on the surface? I think we can go a lot of different directions with that. What are your thoughts?
That goes into how it's adjusted. If that was one of the only 3 comps the appraiser could find, and it was nothing like the subject property, it was, what was it? It's newer, it's larger, and it doesn't have any grapes.
Yeah.
They make adjustments for that. They have to figure out what the market reaction is to those differences and make adjustments for those differences. Doesn't mean it's a bad comp. It just means there might be a lot more adjustments than we would like.
Okay, Sonia, I'll get to your question in a second. I want to continue addressing what Linda was saying. Linda, what I think you're addressing is, hey, this one didn't have grapes on it, and grapes are worth a lot of money. Like they can sell the grapes, they can do all they want with the grapes, they can crush them themselves and get funny little grape juice and stuff between their toes. I mean, it's all fun, right? The reality is that as a residential lender, we're not giving value to potential commercial activity on the property. Cheryl, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, although I have sometimes seen appraisers give value for some agricultural, for the grapes, for example. I have seen that.
What
I don't know that.
Go ahead.
I don't know that that's an accurate thing to do, because like you say, if somebody chooses not to water those grapes, they're gone, they're dead.
Right.
Yeah.
What I've seen is I've seen an adjustment for grapes versus not grapes as a kind of like view versus no view. Like, hey, you're up against the green belt. Well, I don't own the green belt, but it's just kind of nice that you look out your back window and you're looking at a green belt. So that's worth something. Versus, hey, I have a house that has grapes. That's pretty. And there's an orchard too. And it's nice to walk through and run the dog down the grapevines. But they're not giving you value to what you could earn commercially versus the bare land that you can't earn commercially. What I'm more finding is an appraiser is going to give value to it as an amenity to the property, not as a commercial activity. And again, it's all appraiser opinion. Linda, let me know if that didn't answer your question. Sonia, you asked, does the year matter for the comparable sale? So as we're looking at comps, Cheryl, Sonia, I'm hoping you're meaning year built, not year sold, because yes, the year sold matters. Like that has to do with recency. But I'm assuming you mean year built. Yes, year built. Okay, so Cheryl, year built. How does that come into play compared with the subject property?
It would be ideal to find a home that's of similar age, but really the actual condition matters more. So if you have an older home that's been completely remodeled, it wouldn't be unreasonable to comp it to a newer home.
And here's where an example of, hey, I've got my subject is 99 years old. Comp number, whatever we're at, 6, I think over here, is 101 years old. Well, that's kind of the same age. But here's one that's only 58 or 59 years old, and they're adjusting for $20,000 for age of property. So yes, it matters, but it matters simply because, hey, if you had 2 houses right next to each other that were identical, but one of them was 100 years old and one of them is 50 years old, how much extra would you pay to get the younger home? And this appraiser's opinion is you'd pay about 20 grand extra to get the home that is not as old. There's not as much repairs. There's not as much wear and tear. Would you agree with all that, Cheryl?
I would, but you will see a lot of times where they don't make age adjustments. They more consider it in the condition. Just depends on the appraiser.
Yep. So don't be shocked when you don't see an age adjustment. You'll see it sometimes in condition where they'll say, hey, this is an older home, and they won't use the word older, but they'll say it's above average, below average, because it's an older home. And so you might have the same impact, but it won't show on the age line. So Cheryl, here's a question that I know is going to come up. What if you disagree? Hey, a 50, this thing is half the age. That's worth more than 20 grand. Can you argue and say, hey, Mr. Appraiser, I think that the 58-year-old home is worth $30,000 more than the 99-year-old home?
We would have to have data to present to the appraiser saying that a typical buyer would pay more for that or less for that, depending on the age. I've never seen anybody present data that I can present to the appraiser that says you made a wrong age adjustment.
Got it. Okay. So what you're saying is we can stay young forever if we find the fountain of youth, but nobody's found the fountain of youth.
Right.
Okay. Got it. Lisa asked, is there a guideline adjustment for adjustments such as a $5,000 bedroom or $20,000 for a pool? So, is there a Facebook page where appraisers talk and they say, hey, bud, what are y'all using for, the comp for a pool in Lodi? I'm kind of kidding, but is there a guideline for this, or what do they do?
That's not all that far-fetched, John, because appraisers are supposed to be doing as their peers do. So if they're supposed to be talking to each other, although that doesn't always happen, to determine how are they approaching certain things in that marketplace, say some external obsolescence with a freeway running overhead, or a dump site nearby, something like that. Typically, I do see where appraisers in certain areas are giving very similar adjustments for like a bath count. 10,000 is a one that comes up all the time. It's not a guideline. It's not hard and fast. It's the appraiser should be reviewing the market data to see what a typical buyer would pay. But I'm going to tell you that a lot of times they're just stuck in these old numbers where $10,000 a bedroom. Every time, every appraisal, doesn't matter if it's $200,000 home or a $10 million home, they're just giving these standard adjustments. That's what they've been doing for the past 25 years. That doesn't make it right.
Yep.
I know I'm not answering your question here totally.
No, but I think the reality is that, there's not a guideline. If the appraiser says $5,000, we can't argue unless we can literally show, a whole bunch of homes in the same neighborhood to say, hey, here's 5 homes that sold in the last 6 months that all are 3-bedroom, and here and similar everything else. And here's 5 other homes that sold that were 4-bedroom. And you can clearly see that the average difference between these 5 homes was $20,000. And the only difference between them was 1 extra bedroom. The problem is you're not going to find that kind of data. You're not going to find 5 exactly the same at 3-bedroom and at 4-bedroom to prove that. And so we're stuck with whatever the appraiser thinks. And Penny's point, she asks all of her appraisers, and they said pools vary from 10 grand to 35 grand depending upon the appraiser. What she didn't say is depending upon the pool, which is an actual really accurate statement. Like, we'd like to think, yeah, they're between 10 and 35 grand depending upon the pool. It's between 10 and 35 grand, and that's Penny's number. That's not mine or Cheryl's, but it's depending upon the appraiser's opinion of what a buyer will pay for a house that already has a pool in there versus a house that doesn't. Okay, so I've got a lot more to cover and 21 minutes to cover it. So this is really, on the appraisal, the only other thing you're going to do is go down to, I talked about covering the condition of property and then pictures. Just look at the pictures. Okay, so I literally fly by this quickly and I get to the spot of pictures and I'm taking a look, and I'm really looking at the picture and looking at the comments to say, hey, are there any comments underneath it that literally says missing smoke detector? Whatever it tells me on here, I'm looking and saying, hey, wait a second, is that a problem? Like there's now that isn't a problem, that's inside of an attic, but I would look at that and just think from my perspective as an underwriter going to see a challenge with that. All right, perfect. I am done with the appraisal. Again, guys, feel free to keep asking questions, and I'm going to dive back into my report. We talked about rental income comps, so I can skip past this stuff.
Hi, I have a question.
Oh, please go right ahead. Hi, Gems.
Okay. Hi. I missed the beginning part because I was in a meeting. So there's a possible house I'm going to list, and the house needs a new roof, needs floors, and it needs a new AC or HVAC. It had not been updated.
Okay.
How do I adjust for a new roof, say 12,000? How do I do that?
So I have lots of thoughts there. The first thing I'll tell you is, are you trying to sell it in its current condition and price it? Okay. Is is the roof currently leaking, or is it approaching the end of its useful life?
It's way beyond use.
Okay.
It's not, it's towards the end, or it's already, say, 25 years or more.
Okay, so it is likely that the appraiser is going to say that roof is a health or safety issue. A leaky roof is
Okay.
going to lead to mold. It's going to lead to a lot of problems that will be a health and safety issue. And so we cannot close a loan, conventional or FHA or VA, with a health and safety hazard such as a leaky roof, an HVAC that doesn't work. You got to have heat. You got to have the envelope of the home has to be secure. And so in this case, it depends on who you're trying to sell to. Obviously,
Okay.
you have three choices. You can sell to, go ahead.
It's going to be cash then.
Not necessarily. So you have three choices. You can sell to a cash buyer. You're limiting your pool of buyers. You're limiting the potential of how high they're going to go.
Okay.
You can sell to a owner occupant that wants to renovate the property. Your
Okay.
challenge is you really need to find a contractor in your back pocket that is going to give you a bid ahead of time. If you really want to list this appropriately, you get a bid for all of that stuff and you present it as part of your listing. How you put that in the MLS, whether you're allowed to, I don't know. I would personally at least leave it on the kitchen counter saying, hey, here's a bid to get all of the work done. And here's John King's write-up, wink, wink, on what it looks like to finance all of this into it. And you sell it as a, hey, you can get this renovated and you can rebuild the way you want. And this is what the contractor projects the cost to be. You don't have to use this contractor, but he's ready to start working on this if you are. Or you figure out the third option, and the scale of work in your case will prohibit this. But you can sell it to an FHA or conventional buyer that's willing to do an escrow repair holdback. Okay. So a holdback, some lenders won't do, some lenders will. We will do it in most situations. And it says, hey, if you've got $5,000 worth of work that needs to be done to make this property meet lending guidelines, and we have a bid from a contractor that says we will do that work, and they agree to do it within the first 2 weeks after we close, I just hold back 150% of the bid. So in a $5,000 repair cost, I'd hold back $7,500 of the buyer's money, and they would close escrow. They'd get the contractor out there to do the work. I'd have the appraiser confirm the work is done. We'd write a check to the contractor for $5,000. We'd pay the appraiser, and the buyer would get the rest of their money back. That's the third way that you could market this property. But in your case, that's a pretty excessive amount of repairs, and typically we're not going to do a holdback that big.
Okay. How much are normally for holdbacks?
Our ideal is no more than $10,000, including the 150%. So that really means about $6,700 of work, with then the other 3,300 being the extra holdback percentage. I've gotten them approved higher. So our written rule is 10 grand. I've gotten them approved higher. It's really about what's our risk that this work isn't going to get done, or it's going to turn into a significantly bigger project. That makes sense? Perfect. All right. So guys, this was my example real quick of the 3-unit property that we just looked at. The first appraisal came in at $2,200, and we finally got them up to $3,000, and we closed escrow on it. All right. This is really important. We're probably going to spend a good portion of the remaining 15 minutes on this. And this is the biggest question I get. How can appraisers keep justifying market value when we have such an increase in market value that's happening right now? The head of appraisals for Freddie Mac wrote an article last year, I think in July. I'll show you a copy of the article right now. And this is a snip from it. It says, our ongoing oversight reveals data that indicates the current trend in appraisal values coming in below contract price. So contract price is 600 and the appraisal comes in below that. It is typically between 7 and 9% of appraisals come in low from their data from 2013 to 2019. That more than doubled. In April and May of 2021, 20% of the appraisals nationwide came in below contract price. Now, why did that happen? Clearly because values were skyrocketing and appraisers couldn't justify the value. So, oh no, is that not going to let me link it? Come on, let me link it. Okay, good. It's letting me link it now. Yay, and it's working. Perfect. So now you guys will be able to see, as my computer is mad at me, this is what the head of appraisals at Freddie Mac said. And they basically said, look, yeah, we've got challenges. We know that this increase in market value is a challenge for appraisers. And they cited their statistical data. They gave appraisers clear direction, saying, look, you need to pay attention to more than just closed sales. And Cheryl just talked about recency, proximity, and similarity as being the three most important things, and that you have to bracket the sales, meaning that you have to find a comp that sold for higher than what your contract price is. Freddie Mac is saying that isn't really true. Closed sales are lagging current trends, and that appraisers should look at all market behavior, not just the behavior reflected by closed sales. You can look at general inventory, trends in list prices. I'll let you guys read this, but basically look at a lot of different things, and you can use those trends to provide augmentation to the closed loan data. And they make it more clear that, hey, some of these leading indicators, such as multiple offers on homes. Gang, if you are a listing agent and you have multiple offers on a home, it is almost impossible for the appraiser to know that. That is one piece of statistical data that you are the only holder to that information. You have an obligation to your seller to show the realtor that you had multiple offers so that they can justify in their report, hey, I had 10 people offering pretty close to this price. That is a very good indicator that the contract price is supported with the current trends. Cheryl, would you agree with that? And do you have any comments to add on that piece?
I do. That's the tricky part, though, because even if you've got 10 offers and they're all at or over list price, the appraiser still needs to justify that with closed sales, but they also need to look and include current listings and current pending sales, and they can put more weight on those in this type of a market. Typically, they just only include listings and pendings just for further data. But what Freddie Mac is saying is maybe actually consider putting weight on those, because that is where the market is headed. The listings and the pendings are the most current, but they still do have to justify with sales, either pending or closed, that these are supported. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think that Freddie goes on to make it super clear. Hey guys, we're seeing a conservative trend in overall adjustments that some appraisers are offsetting. They're saying, hey, we're gonna offset by under adjusting somewhere else. And they're saying this isn't needed, that any adjustment in any amount is perfectly acceptable, provided the appraiser has market support. Now, the problem is you can't send this to the appraiser saying, hey, here's what Freddie Mac said, go rewrite my report. Okay, that's our catch-22. Don't say John King said, hey, John, have Cheryl show them the Freddie Mac letter. It doesn't work that way. But our appraisers understand this. I will tell you that I hope Murphy's not listening. I've had a lot of over asking price contracts, and it's been probably about 9 months since I've had an appraisal come in low. And I've closed 140 purchases in the last 14 months. And so I'm doing a lot of purchase transactions, and very few of them are coming in low because our appraisers that we hand select understand this concept. Cheryl, would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that statement. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's very clear. It's saying, hey, lenders can give positive feedback to appraisers to reinforce all of this, and that's Cheryl's job. So that's where Cheryl is jumping in and helping out with this. All right, guys, we got 11 minutes left. I want to go through a couple of things that I think you're gonna get a lot of value out of. The first thing is, hey, John, this is all great, but what if we can just get an appraisal waiver? I saw something on Facebook. Everything on Facebook is true, right? I saw something on Facebook where an agent was saying, hey, some lenders choose to waive the appraisal if you're putting more than 20% down. It's not some lenders. It's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And it is up to the computer to decide. And the computer, Fannie and Freddie, collect every single appraisal that is done across the nation, and they aggregate the data. So they know what every appraised value was on every home that has been appraised in this neighborhood. And they use that data to say, I'm totally cool with this value. It's a strong buyer with good credit, with a good down payments. And I'm totally comfortable with not needing an appraisal. I waive that appraisal. So there are opportunities where we can even put the contract price in and the property address in before you write the offer and run it through the system to determine if we get an appraisal waiver. But they have to put at least 20% down. So if you got somebody putting less than 20% down, you will never get a waiver. If you're doing FHA or VA, you will never get a waiver. It's only on conventional. Purchase price under $1 million. So here's what's crazy. You buy a house for $1.2 million and you put down $1 million. You are borrowing $200,000 on a $1.2 million home. That one should obviously qualify for a waiver, but it can't, because the rules simply say the purchase price must be under $1 million. If the house is worth more than $1 million, then, or if the value contract price is over $1 million, you will not get a waiver. So weird little things. Most lenders don't understand how the rules work. They think it's a mystery in the little black box. It's not much of a mystery if you understand how to do it. And here's the cool thing though. If I have a contract price of $800,000 and somebody is putting down $400,000, well, maybe the first time I run it, I put the contract price at 800 and the loan amount at 400, and it says, yep, you need an appraisal. But I lower the estimate of value to 700,000 and I run it again. I can get a waiver, even though the purchase price is 400 and nothing changes on your guys' end. It's just internally, it's still an $800,000 purchase. We're just telling the system, we think this is really worth 700, and the system's like, yeah, I'm totally cool with that. And the buyer gets to skip having an appraisal done. It's a trick that I use, especially for writing offers and wanting to go with no appraisal contingency. Speaking of appraisal contingencies, here's the things that you need to ask prior to releasing contingency. Has the appraisal been signed off by underwriting? Just because you saw the report does not mean the underwriter has agreed to it. If not, then you need to ask your lender, ask me, because I'm going to be your lender on every transaction starting tomorrow. What is the CU score? Cheryl, can you give a 30-second definition of what a CU score is?
Yes, Fannie Mae has a program. It's called Collateral Underwriter, where every single appraisal that's ever done for lending purposes of any type goes through their system, and they look at all kinds of different algorithms, and then they come up with a CU score. 1 meaning very low risk, 5 meaning high risk. It could be for overvaluation. It might not be for overvaluation. It could get a high risk score for just some quality issues on the appraisal itself.
For example, if every home in that community had an adjustment of $10,000 for the extra bedroom, and this appraiser decided to give $30,000 for the extra bedroom, collateral underwriting is going to catch that, and it's going to say to Cheryl and the underwriter, hey gang, this appraiser said that the extra bedroom is worth 30 grand, and everybody else in that community, every other appraiser gave 10 grand. Have the appraiser explain why they gave 30 grand and what makes this extra bedroom worth more than the average extra bedroom in that community. Cheryl, is that a fair statement?
Pretty fair, yep.
And the appraiser comes back and says, here's why. And if they explain reasonably why this extra bedroom is worth 3 times the amount of the average extra bedroom, we're golden. If they can't, they might have to decrease the value by 20 grand. Because they were a little more aggressive in the comp and they couldn't really justify why they did it. And sometimes that creates a revision to lower the value, even though the first time came in at value. Fair statement, Cheryl?
Yeah, but it's real hard. We cannot say, hey, we don't agree with this. You need to lower that adjustment. We could never, ever say that to an appraiser.
Nor would we want to. We just have to ask them to explain. But
Yes.
I've seen it. I saw it once in my career where the appraiser came back and said, yeah, I can't really explain it. And they lowered their value.
Yeah.
So that can happen. So
It's rare.
if you're worried about releasing your contingency and the underwriter has not signed off on it, you need to ask about your CU score. Crystal, Cheryl, 4 or above is bad. Where do you draw the line?
I think that I think it's 2.6 and above. Our underwriters need to dig into the appraisal. 2.5 and lower, they don't need to look at the appraisal methodology necessarily. They just need to look for, make sure the contract price is right, make sure all the particulars, the data is right, but they don't have to dig into the actual comps and value.
Got it. So if it's over 2.5, you might want to say, hey, John, let's take a look at this. Can you get an underwriter to look at it before we release the contingency? And obviously check for hidden property conditions. Guys, here's the other thing I want to talk about. What if we just do no appraisal contingency? We're all seeing it. We're seeing contracts being written with no appraisal contingency. And I am having more and more conversations with buyer's agents at the time they are writing the contract. I spent 20 minutes on the phone this morning with a buyer's agent, between the buyer's agent and myself, strategizing on how we were going to write the offer. And I encourage all of you to do that. Let's find a time when you're writing an offer to talk about it. Now, we don't need to talk about it on every single home, but at least have that conversation once or twice with every buyer as you get them in the car to talk about the numbers. And I'll use the example. This was actually my client from this morning, where we decided not to write, and we basically decided to write the offer with no appraisal contingency, because well, this isn't the exact example, but let's give an example of a $500,000 list price, and you go $100,000 over and you offer 600 grand. So you're putting 20% down. Now the realtor says, my comps show 500 to 525. I can still do the loan because the borrower is putting 20% down on 600. So the loan amount is $480,000. Because they have good credit, I could qualify them even if their loan to appraised value was up as high as 95%. In other words, they would have a one-time mortgage insurance fee. It might cost them $5,000. I think the next page I show you what the mortgage insurance fee cost is. So I'll get to that in a second. There's a one-time fee to buy out of the mortgage insurance, but that's the only risk the buyer has. As long as it appraises for $506,000, they can still do the $480,000 loan amount on the $600,000 purchase price. The only difference is my risk on the loan is no longer assuming 20% equity. It's assuming 5% equity because the appraisal came in at 506. So now I would say to you as the agent, do you have any doubt this is going to be appraising any less than 506? And you're like, no, honestly, I don't think it'll go lower than that. Perfect. Then you either can completely waive your appraisal contingency, or at the very least offer a $90,000 appraisal gap coverage. Now I'm using 90 because I'm rounding the 600,000 and 510. But for this client, they can have an appraisal gap up to 90 grand with no extra money out of their pocket other than the one-time mortgage insurance fee, which is somewhere between $5,700 and $8,000. Think about that. You could have a $90,000 low appraisal. Most buyers are unwilling to offer an appraisal gap because they're worried that I got to come up with that money out of my pocket. In this case, this $90,000 low value, the only extra money they need out of their pocket is a one-time fee of somewhere between $5,700 and $8,000. And they had exactly the same monthly payment, exactly the same terms, and they got their offer accepted because they had no appraisal contingency on there. Hopefully this helps you guys. I think this is something that I need to get more proactive with you as we've got buyers in the car and we're talking about strategies, including shortening close of escrow timeframes as well. Do I service buyers in San Diego, SoCal area? I go everywhere in California personally. So I'm licensed all in the state of California. So Reina, I would love to take care of you in San Diego. I have partners in Summit Funding in 43 other states. So I can get the process started and refer it to one of my partners in almost every other state, but absolutely. And we can connect after and I can talk more about that part. I got 2 minutes left. I have some basic Q&As. The one thing I do want to talk about is what are we doing to help get appraisals in faster? This is, by the way, guys, post questions. Kathy, I can get you connected to a lender in Texas. Hopefully Jen is still on the call. Actually, I have the, if you guys have questions you want me to follow up, put it in chat because the chat saves and I can get it later. I have 1 minute left and then you guys can stick around if I go a little long, but I want to talk about turn time. Turn times are a major problem right now. You're all feeling it. I am in the process of trying to get a guaranteed turn time in the Central Valley, Sacramento area, but it's going to come at a cost. So it's going to be a choice for your buyer that says, hey, if you want to write a 15-day close of escrow with a 5-day appraisal contingency and a 5-day loan contingency, I'm almost ready to offer that. What it's going to mean is your borrower may have to pay $1,000 or $1,500 for an appraisal. And that's what I'm trying to figure out right now is what is the dollar amount that my appraisers will say, gosh, for that much money, I'll work overtime. I'll get it done for you in 3 or 5 days. And that gives you the opportunity to write a short close of escrow to get them into contract without having to worry about competing as much with cash. And the longer they wait, the higher prices are going and the higher interest rates are going. So I would rather pay $1,000 or $1,500 for an appraisal and know that I can win on the offer. And that's one of the things that we're doing. And I should be rolling that out hopefully in the next week or two to be able to give you guys a higher cost guaranteed faster appraisal turn time. So I am exactly at 1:30. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. If you guys have any other questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes and answer. Otherwise, I really appreciate you guys joining. Please remember, I am not a nonprofit organization, so I provide this information to give you value, but I hope to earn your trust and your referrals in return. So if you know anybody who needs help with financing, I'm your guy. I'd love the opportunity to help you out, and feel free to unmute or post into chat if you have any questions. And I hope you all have an absolutely amazing afternoon. Thank you, Barbara. Bye. Anybody else got any questions? Our numbers are dropping. Thanks, Audrey. Thanks, Kathy. Bye, Kathy. Jacob, thank you. Gems, yes, I'm posting this to my YouTube channel, so I'll get it posted either overnight or tomorrow morning, so you will be able to see this on my YouTube channel. And yes, Gems, I will send you a copy of the YouTube link. Thanks, Anita. Thanks, Chris. Rosemary, appreciate it. I feel like I'm like at the end of Mr. Rogers and talking to little kids through the TV. Thank you, Timmy. Don't forget to do your homework. I got to go put on my outside jacket now and my outside shoes. All right. Most of you may not know who Mr. Rogers is. Some of you do.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, right.
Do we think that everybody has a good handle on what the difference between an AMC and the way we do business? I mean, have you been talking to your folks about that?
I've been talking, and I wanted to talk more about that today. Hold on, I'm going to stop the recording. Boom, stop recording. We didn't get into that much, and I will cover that